Over the past 75 years, more than 10,000 chemicals have entered our food supply, but the EU allows just 300 additives. At Thrive Market, we prioritize quality, banning over 1,000 ingredients found in conventional grocery stores. Our Healthy Swap scanner helps you find better versions of your pantry essentials without the junk, dyes, or fillers, and everything is delivered right to your doorstep. So shop at a grocery store that actually cares about your health at thrivemarket.com/get-started for 30% off your first order and a free $60 gift.
Hi, this is Rooster from Outcry Radio. Catch me here on Blog Talk Radio every Saturday night at 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, or follow my blog at conservativeoutcry.net. Now, back to the Sackheads.
Thank you, Rooster.
So nice of him to do our lead-in every single... We just leave him sitting there on hold all night for him to do that lead-in.
Every time. You would think he would just record it and give it to us.
No. That's too difficult. It involves a recording device, and he's not quite up to the talkie yet.
I just think that he doesn't like to be recorded at all.
So right now on the phone, we're going to welcome to the show Contra Costa County District Attorney Mark Peterson, and he's going to be speaking to us about the group California Death Penalty Reform, or Californians for Death Penalty Reform, excuse me. Mark, how are you, sir?
Very good. Thank you for having me.
So why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about the group and the history of it, if you will.
Sure. Well, obviously we have a death penalty system or a death penalty here in the state of California. Unfortunately, the whole process is broken. It doesn't work.
Severely.
And, yeah, it doesn't work at all. And one of the major problems with it is the length of delays. For example, someone gets convicted of a death penalty type crime. A jury returns a verdict of death. It takes 5 years for the convicted person to get an attorney for the appeal. It takes 12 years for the California state appeals to be decided, and then another 13 years for the federal appeals to be decided. So if someone's convicted today, it would not be for 25 years before they would possibly be executed here in the state of California. So the system is broken, and our group is trying to fix the system.
So that's 25 years a victim has to wait to get closure.
That's right.
For a victim's family.
That's right.
Is that a problem that is seen across the nation, or is that unique to California? And if it's unique to California, why is that?
Yeah, it's somewhat a problem in other states also, but California is probably the extreme example. And the reason for that is many years ago, the California Constitution reads that all cases where someone's been sentenced to death, immediately the appeal goes to the California Supreme Court. The thinking back then, and there's some logic behind it, is these cases are so important, death's the ultimate punishment, we should have the best legal minds looking at that case, thus it should be the California Supreme Court. But that was before we had as many cases as we have now. And now, this California Supreme Court, which is one court made of 7 justices, can't hear all the appeals. There are 750 men on death row. They have about 450 appeals pending, and the California Supreme Court just doesn't have the time and ability to hear all of those.
Hello? You there? Mark, are you there? Give me another second to try to come back.
Sure. You know, their website, www.deathpenaltyreform.com, for anybody interested in checking out, has some interesting statistics on it. What it says is death row inmates in the state of California have murdered over 1,000 victims, including 229 children and 43 police officers. 235 victims were raped, and 90 of the victims were tortured. So that kind of tells you about the seriousness about some of these crimes, and people are waiting 25 years for closure.
Yeah,
exactly. Do we have them back? Are you back, sir?
Yes, I am.
Okay,
yeah, I don't know what happened. Polly Klatt, for example, was murdered 20 years ago, or it was 20 years since that crime was convicted or committed, and the responsible, Richard Allen Davis, still has not been executed.
Yeah, and to give some of our listeners who may not be familiar with that case, that was a case out of Sonoma County where Paula Klaas
Yes.
was abducted from her home in Petaluma, was executed, I believe, off of Pythian Road, somewhere off of Highway 12 in the city of Santa Rosa, or unincorporated Sonoma County, and then her body was dumped off of Highway 101. And this is a little
Right.
girl. And
Exactly. And that family has not had Justice Mark Klaas, and the mother of Polly have not had justice for this number of years, and the citizens of California are paying $50,000 a year to house each one of these individuals every year, $50,000 per year.
And that's just
per inmate.
That's just the base. That doesn't include any medical issues, any special medication or anything like that, or
Right.
As you know,
cable television, chocolate
special
cake.
education. Has there been a push, especially with the use of DNA so heavily lately, and how it's been used to exonerate? Has there been any thought or talk that you know of about changing it so if there is DNA used, perhaps it could speed the process up a little bit?
Well, that's an interesting fact. We hear all the time, it seems like all the time, or several times, when a wrongly convicted and then they're released from custody, which is something none of us want. None of us want somebody to be wrongfully convicted. Interestingly enough, in the state of California, the protections are so extensive, there's never been any incident where any innocent person's been executed in the state of California. Governor Brown, who happens to be personally against the death penalty, has even reviewed himself many of these individuals on death row, and even though he's philosophically opposed to the death penalty, he himself has not found any innocent person on death row. But if there are ways to use DNA to find or determine if someone hasn't committed the crime, certainly we're supportive of that. We want to catch the right person, we want to convict the right person, but the protections in place in the state of California are extensive. Only 1% of all the murders that get committed is the person even charged with the death penalty. So it's not sought very often.
And now you talked about the California Court of Appeals hears the death penalty appellate cases, and does the district, because I know the appellate courts in California have various districts, and do the particular districts in which the guilty verdict was rendered, are those who hear those cases a panel or the full court?
Yeah, well, the problem is that it is the California Supreme Court right now that hears all of them. So they hear all the death penalty appeals. Our proposal is
I thought the Court of Appeal heard it first. Okay.
No, that's the problem. The backlog is so severe, one court cannot hear all these appeals, and that's probably where I got cut off before. The California Supreme Court right now hears all these appeals, and one court simply can't handle the number of appeals. However, there are 105 appellate court justices, and 3 justices at a time can hear these appeals. So if you spread the appeal amongst the courts of appeals directly, 35 courts could hear these appeals instead of one of them, and that would help get rid of the backlog. That is the problem. And interestingly enough, this was in 2008, a bipartisan commission, the Fair Commission on the Administration of Justice, decided that this should take place. They recommended the very changes we're suggesting. And the California Supreme Court agreed with them, said, please make these changes, legislature, and the legislature refuses to fix this problem.
So what is the fix?
The fix is to send all the appeals to the California Court of Appeals first. The California Supreme Court can still hear them if they want to, but to send the cases to the Court of Appeals first. That's exactly what needs to happen. Our bill also requires that these inmates get an attorney within a year of their conviction, and they should. Why should they be on death row without an attorney if, in fact, there was something that was done wrong in the trial? We want them to get an attorney quicker. So there are many protections still built in for the inmate, but it does expedite the process. Okay.
And now if the state appellate courts hear the case and they find that there's no reason to overturn the conviction, would the state Supreme Court would then have the option to review it as well, and then would it go to the Ninth Circuit?
Yes, exactly. The California Supreme Court could still review it. And the California Supreme Court, if for some reason they saw a case and they wanted to take it without it even going to the Court of Appeals, they can do that too. So it actually...
Zaxby's just out-Phillied the Philly again. The Zaxby's Chicken Philly is back with garlic aioli, sautéed peppers and onions, decadent melty cheese, and your choice of Zaxby's signature crispy chicken fingers or delicious grilled chicken. But it's only back for a limited time, so enjoy it while you can. No pressure. It's just the greatest sandwich of all time on a ticking clock. Order the Chicken Philly today. Who's got the sauce? Zaxby's.
Adds a layer of protection in for the suspect or the convicted. He gets a Court of Appeals review and a California Supreme Court review if the California Supreme Court review chooses to hear the case. And then it goes on, like you mentioned, to the federal courts of appeal.
Would there be an option for because just as kind of a layperson looking back at this, one of my first questions would be, okay, so these appellate courts hear all of these cases. Let's say they're all upheld. Would the state Supreme Court still have a backlog because the appellate courts are finding no reason to overturn these cases, or is there a mechanism in place to where the state Supreme Court could bypass it or rubber stamp it in some way and send it up to the ninth?
Yeah, absolutely, that could occur there. Absolutely, it would deal with the backlog because if you think about it for a minute, the Supreme Court justices, California Supreme Court justices, would read the California Court of Appeals opinion, and if in their opinion, their judgment, the Court of Appeals made the right decision, they've already looked at all the cases, they've reviewed all the transcripts, and they could just affirm it, and it goes on to the next step. For example, one of my last death penalty cases, the inmate or the suspect admitted doing the killing, said he was proud of doing the killing, he would do it again, he represented himself at trial. There are virtually no appellate issues there. Does that really need to be reviewed by the California Supreme Court? No. A California Court of Appeals can review it. Then the Supreme Court can look at it as closely as they need to, but it doesn't need all the examination from the California Supreme Court initially.
Is there anything in the bill, because this obviously is a very important issue, and it's one that we feel strongly about here at Sackheads Radio, so we certainly appreciate your time coming on and talking to the folks about it. Is there anything in place in terms to deal with the fact, I know that there has been an issue with the method in which the death penalty is carried out, in terms of certain pharmaceutical companies won't sell the states the proper medication to administer the lethal injection. There have been appeals gone up saying that, well, it's cruel and unusual because they can still feel things, although their breathing and so forth has been stopped, so it's like they're suffocating. But is there anything in the bill to deal with those pharmaceutical companies who will not administer the medication, or to deal with that obstacle on the other side when it is time to actually carry the penalty out for the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation or for the courts to be able to carry out that punishment in a timely manner as well?
Right. Our bill addresses a couple of those problems, but not all of them, like the availability of the drugs and the fact that pharmaceutical companies refuse to sell them to states so the states can't execute these people. That is not able to be addressed in this bill. However, we do address in this bill that doctors who participate in the process as either administering the drugs or participate in some way cannot have their medical license revoked or taken away or penalized because they participate in a medically approved fashion in the execution. So it does address that. You bring up a very good point about some of these Department of Corrections regulations. Some of them are just absurd, and the legislature refuses to fix some of these problems. For example, right now, if someone wants to provide input on an execution, they can just send an email to the Department of Corrections saying, I oppose that execution. The Department of Corrections is required to meaningfully respond, meaning they've got to actually send an email back as to what they're doing, and it's called the Administrative Procedures Act. Well, this requires, so what happens is they just send spam email to the Department of Corrections. They have to respond to 20,000, 30,000 emails. The whole purpose is just to gum up the process, and so we deal with that in this legislation. But the cocktail, free drug cocktail, or one drug is still an issue. We haven't fixed that.
Okay. Well, hopefully we'll have a way to. Mark, I'm going to bring Phyllis in here, and if you want to stay on with us, I really appreciate your time, but I definitely want Phyllis to be able to tell us her story. And Phyllis, are you there?
Yes, I am. And actually, the killer of my son was prosecuted in Contra Costa County, the county that Mark's district attorney in. My son was a Pittsburgh police officer who was murdered during a foot pursuit of two individuals who had just robbed a bank and a grocery store. And my son was killed in 2005. And if I could elaborate using a personal example, in our case, because Mark talked about the delay being on the front end in the appointment of counsel. In my son's case, his killer was sentenced to die November 2nd, 2007. His attorney for the appeal was not even appointed until March 25th, 2011. There still has not been an opening brief filed by his appellate attorney. He's requested and been given 10 continuances, and he probably will be given more continuances. So the delay and how families end up waiting decades for justice starts on the front end, and that's one of the important parts of our initiative. And I was listening to the show, and I heard your question about the DNA. And, you know, what I have seen occur on death row in California, especially when these DNA results have come in, what they've done is they've tied the death row killer into other cases. And there are several of them that have been given second death row sentences because of a cold case hit from DNA. Example, Michael Lyons was a little 8-year-old boy that was abducted, raped, killed, tortured, knifed over 70 times. And his killer, Robert Rhodes, was sentenced to death for killing little Michael Lyons. And they did a DNA match and hit a cold case hit out of a young 18-year-old Hayward High School student who was kidnapped. And so Robert Rhodes received a second death sentence based upon a DNA hit in Alameda County. That's what you're going to find DNA doing. You're going to find more people being convicted of other cases because they're in the system now their DNA can be matched.
And I also want to know, Phyllis, as a victim of the victim's family, I can't even imagine how unnerving and how just tumultuous and heart-wrenching it must be to sit there and watch this happen. And you know, your son was a police officer in Pittsburgh, California for 5 years. He was a United States Marine.
He was a Marine captain.
He was a Marine captain. He was a husband. He was a father. And all that was taken by these two individuals.
Dirtbags.
Thugs. We're an opinion show. We have that right. And the conviction was complete. He was sentenced. They were sentenced to death, and now we're sitting here. You said 7 years later, and it hasn't even started yet. How does it make you feel like the state has just completely ignored the family, or the judicial system has completely ignored the family?
I think what you feel like is that people that participate in any capital case go in, and the jurors do a very good job, but a very difficult job for them, and it's hard. Everybody works really hard. The defendants get 2 defense attorneys, the prosecutors work hard, the judges work hard. It's traumatic for the victims. You get the sentence, and then you wait, and it's like a promise has been broken to you. And that's very hard. You know, one of the things I also want to say about my son served his country as a Marine officer. He lost his life protecting his community. He was an organ donor, saved 5 lives. He was expecting his first child. My grandson was born 2.5 months after my son was killed. I don't know what more my son could have possibly given the citizens of the state of California. Therefore, I feel no hesitation in asking the same citizens to now work with us to help reform the death penalty so that we get the justice that we're entitled to. By the way, my son's killer didn't even contest at trial that he killed him. You know, to be found guilty of a capital crime, you have to be found to have committed a crime that had special circumstances. And it only takes one special circumstance. My son's killer was charged with 3 special circumstances. And he admitted 2 of them. He admitted he killed my son in the performance of his duty as a police officer. Mm-hmm. He admitted that he shot him during the commission of a robbery. What he denied and contested was lying in wait. So there's no question as to did he do it. He did do it. He admitted at trial he did it. And as my son lay dying, his fellow officers tried to render medical aid, and he shot at them until he ran out of bullets.
Man, that's a heart-wrenching story, and I want to tell you that I'm so sorry for your loss, and I am, and I know you are very proud of the service, and I'm very thankful for the service that your son gave not only his country but to the citizens of California, and I thank you for that and for him, and we're blessed to have men and women in uniform that are willing to lay their lives down and on the line rather than swerve from the path of duty with that. And we're going to go ahead and give you guys some time, and if you could let everybody know where to reach you guys, what can they do? Are you folks looking for donations? I know you're looking for votes. Is this going to be a ballot initiative?
We're looking for signatures to sign the initiative. We have to have over 807,000 signatures. If people visit our website, deathpenaltyreform.com, they can have a petition sent to them, maybe circulated among their family members and friends and neighbors. Send it back to us. Help us reach that 807,000. And if anyone has an extra $5 or $10, you can donate to us, because these to get an initiative on the ballot is very expensive. And unfortunately, there are many people that have millions of dollars that are willing to lay it down for killers. Not nearly so with victims. You would think it would be the reverse, but it's not. Just like the liberal media will give voice to the killers. And so I want to thank you for giving voices to myself, and I know you're going to be talking to Kermit. Thank you for giving victims voices. There are 234 child victims of death row killers right now. That figure's gone up since the one on our website. A guy was convicted in Riverside a couple of weeks ago of killing his second child, a 2-month-old baby. We need to have our stories told, so you give us that forum, and I so thank you for that.
It's the least we can do. It's an honor for us. This is, believe me, if we can help more, we absolutely will. We can email, shoot me an email on how we can help, and we absolutely will. This is just such a story that needs to get told. Like you said, the liberal media is not touching this. They make such a big deal out of the...
Well, no, because they're anti-death penalty.
Right, they're anti-everything, but they're
anti-anything.
They'll highlight the story of the suspect from how he grew up as with the rough childhood in a bad neighborhood, et cetera, et cetera.
He was turning his life around.
But they don't highlight the victim's family and what they're going through and what they have to give and the agony that they live in every day. And to me, that's
it's so true. And the legislature.
Well, it's so true. No, I agree. And what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to bring in Mr. Kermit Alexander, who is another family of a victim, and his story is just as touching and heart-wrenching. And Kermit, are you there, sir?
Yes, I am.
If you could, for those who don't know, maybe recognizing the name of Kicking It Around, you are a former NFL player. You played for the 49ers. You played for the Seahawks and the Rams, if I'm 100%?
No, I played for the 49ers for 7 years, 3 years with the Los Angeles Rams, and 4 years, my last 4 years with the Philadelphia Eagles.
I'm sorry, the Eagles.
The Eagles, that's okay. And I'm a past president of the NFL Players Union.
So you definitely have a story to tell now, and I'm going to let you tell your story from the beginning and the end, and then I'll ask you questions. I don't want to interrupt you if that's okay.
That's okay. Well, my story happened in 1984. I overslept. Normally on a Friday morning I go in and have coffee with my mom and review what happened during the week, talk to her about what the kids are doing, my fellow brothers and sisters, what she's doing and how can we help, and various and sundry of personal things like that. That particular Friday morning I overslept. I was rudely awakened by my brother calling, saying to me, "Mom's been messed up, Kermit. Why did they do that to her?" And I had no idea what he was talking about. I told him to calm down. Now explain to me what happened. He said he had heard some noise in the room, heard some gunshots, went in, and the killer had just killed my baby sister and 2 nephews and had earlier killed my mother. He wrestled with the guy, fought with him, got hit in the face with the gun, broke free, fell on the floor and pushed the guy down next to him, and then ran out of the house. Killer and his accomplice went outside and got in a car and drove away. When he called me, all of this had already happened, and he was hysterical. I told him to sit down in the living room as calmly as possible. I'll be right there. And about 35 minutes later, I drove in. And when I got there, the house was surrounded by police. They were cordoned off, wouldn't allow anybody in or out of the house, and the whole neighborhood was in an uproar. I found out through one of the policemen who took me and my brother to headquarters to question us about what had happened. That's when I found out the news that my family had been massacred. My brother was destitute. He had been home because he was ill. He was heartbroken because he couldn't do anything to prevent it. And so I had to console him and control myself because obviously I was angry and wanted to take it out on someone. That's the story of the death of my family. I looked for the killer for about 8 months before he was captured in another incident. I never got a chance to get my hands on him, which probably is a blessing because either I or both of us would have been killed. He then went through the trial process, was found guilty without a reasonable doubt because his handprint was on a couch, on a trunk that put him in the scene. His accomplice had already given state's evidence, so the 2 of them had gone to commit a murder, but they were going to a murder for hire. And what apparently had happened, either they scouted the people that they were going to kill, and they were at my mom's house, which is not unusual because she had kids over the house all the time, or they misread the address and went to the wrong house. In any case, they were hired by a businessman to wipe out a lawsuit because a family member had gotten hurt at a nightclub and had filed a lawsuit against him. He was going to get rid of the lawsuit by hiring this gang member to wipe out a family. They just went to the wrong house and killed the wrong family.
Oh, Lord.
Now, how terrible can you be?
Well, the fact that they would even take the contract to begin with tells you how terrible of people they are, and then it gets worse. So here we are 30 years later, and where's this case stand right now, Kermit?
The killer that was given a death sentence, the other 2 gentlemen that were with him got life with no parole. Because he was a trigger man, he got life. He didn't get life, he got the death penalty. And it's been reaffirmed through several cases that they tried to get it overturned, and it wasn't. It was a clear case of murder for hire, and he was just too stupid to go to the right place. He has sat on death row since 1986, I believe it. And we have been patiently waiting for the state to do its duty. And everything and anything gets in the way to prevent people from doing what they're supposed to be doing, starting with the governor on down.
And so where does the case stand now?
Terribly incensed about the way our justice system works. Once we've completed the case and it's gone beyond the trial and the conviction is obtained and then reaffirmed and reaffirmed and reaffirmed, and then nothing happens.
So there hasn't been any movement essentially in this case.
Has the appellate process been exhausted, I take it, and it's been reaffirmed and reaffirmed? So has the state or has CDC mentioned what they're waiting on? Is there any communication?
No. First they had problems with the type of medication they were supposed to use, so they changed that, and they went from a 3-drug protocol to a 1-drug protocol, and now we're waiting for them to stop dragging their feet and do what they're supposed to do.
So there's no other legal proceedings that they're waiting on. Everything is in place, ready to go. It's just whenever CDC decides to carry out the judge's order of execution.
That's correct. That's one of the reasons why I became a proponent for adjusting the death penalty so that it would not run into these roadblocks incessantly. So what we're promoting is that clean up the process.
So, and I don't know if we still have the district attorney online or not. I'm not an attorney, but it would seem to me that if an agency is refusing to carry out a court order, the court order being the death penalty, I know there's provisions in law about disobeying a court order. So can an agency be held liable some type, or an identified agent of the agency for disobeying a court order by failing to carry out an execution?
Well, that's a good question.
They aren't refusing to do it. If they aren't putting roadblocks in the way, other people are continuously putting roadblocks in the way, which extends the time for more and more deliberation. We have thousands of dollars being poured into California from outside the state to delay and possibly eliminate the death penalty. And what they say is because it's taken so long, it doesn't work, and therefore it should be eliminated. And I say if you give it a chance to work, then we'll see whether it works or not. The ironic thing about it, I'm a former probation officer. I'm a former teacher. I'm a former coach. I'm a husband and a father. I'm the eldest in a family of 14 kids. And how do you look your brothers and sisters in the eye and say the law is what it is and we're blessed because we have it? Because in our case, we are not blessed. We're being tortured by our own system.
I absolutely agree. Mark Peterson, are you still on the line?
Yes, I'm here.
Could you go back to Clint's question a little bit? Is there any provision in law or what can be done with the CDC to bring that law forward or to put pressure on?
Yeah, I mean, if they're failing to carry out a court order, is there a 166 case? Is there something that, just looking up online preliminarily, is there anything that can be done in order to get some folks who are responsible for failing to carry out that judge's order?
Yes, we are trying to get the elected officials to do their duty. And matter of fact, Steve Cooley, the former Los Angeles district attorney, and I believe one of the district attorneys up here in Northern California have actually filed cases to try and get court orders for them to go forward with executions, specifically on the 3-drug protocol. Now, I happen to believe it's absurd that even the 3-drug protocol is cruel and unusual punishment, but unfortunately we have some activist judges who have said that. So we go, okay, let's go to the 1 drug that is approved in other states by the Supreme Court. It is constitutional. Well, when we try to go to that drug protocol, the elected officials seem to be dragging their feet to actually do that. So, yes, we're having to go to court to force our elected officials to do what the voters have said they want done. The voters of the state of California support the death penalty. They just don't like a broken death penalty. So what our reform initiative is trying to do is fix a broken process. But one of the problems is the legislature refuses to fix the problem. The governor refuses to fix the problem. The attorney general is refusing to fix the problem. So our only recourse is to go to the citizens to make our elected officials do what we want them to do.
Now, I have a hypothetical, and just hypothetical here. What would happen, besides the courts laughing the case out, if you went and you identified an individual at whatever correctional facility who was responsible for failing to carry out the order of death, which I believe would be a court order, right? That's a sentence.
Right.
What would happen if you brought again, just from Googling laws here, what would happen if you brought a case about failure to obey a court order forward on that person? Out of curiosity here.
Right. Well, they would go to their state attorney or the attorney that represents the Department of Corrections, and they would file a response and say, you haven't sued the right person. They're following what the governor or others are telling them to do, and you need to, sue the governor, for example. And we may have to take whatever steps we feel necessary to get these actions done by our elected officials to basically follow the law. But right now, they're thumbing their nose at it. It's somewhat similar to when there's an issue that gets passed. If an elected official, perhaps the attorney general, doesn't believe in it, then that person many times refuses to defend that law that was passed by the citizens in the courts. Very frustrated that they interject their own personal beliefs to thwart the will of the people, but that is what happens, and we'll probably continue to need to take legal action to get the law to be enforced.
And unfortunately, right now, it seems like this country, we have a real problem with elected officials not following the law from the federal level all the way down on a regular basis. So that's a problem. I do have two more questions, real quick. Kermit, in your situation, we had a question in the chat room. What happened to the person that contracted those two killers?
He disappeared. He left town, and we believe he left the country. He was a Jamaican-born. I believe he was a Jamaican-born U.S. citizen who disappeared when this case hit the papers, and the perpetrators were telling everything that they know because they didn't care, and he disappeared. We tried to find him. We have not been able to.
Oh, Lord. And well, with that, we're up against a break. Folks, Kermit, Phyllis, Mark, we're going to do more with this, and we want to follow up with you guys as time goes on. This is just something that has to be watched. My heart breaks for the families, especially Phyllis and Kermit, you two specifically, but the victims in general throughout the state that are suffering by this. We'll do our best to help you guys get this message out. This isn't something that can go under the radar any longer, in our opinion.
And please feel free to contact our show if you'd like to come back on and discuss it more. We would love to have you. I want to thank you folks very much. Mark, would you want to tell the folks where they can find this information one more time?
Yeah, the website, reformthedeathpenalty.com, and we'd love to have contributions and help on this, and thank you very much for having us on your program.
Anytime.
Thank you
we
so
certainly
much.
appreciate your time coming on. Thank you, folks.
And
God bless.
Phyllis and Kermit, our prayers are with you guys. We're going to be back in 3 here on the Sackheads Radio Show. We're going to talk about the state GOP convention and some speeches we had from there.